Good evening and welcome. Tonight is Monday, March 12th, 2018. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. It's 7 o'clock p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. Will all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of tonight's agenda in front of them. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes of our February 26, 2018 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 4 through 6. Any changes and correction to those minutes? There is one that I pointed out to Barb on page 4. The third paragraph down refers to Mayor Pro Tem Grams. It is now Carlin, so she will make that change. There's that. With that change, is there a motion for approval?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as presented with that one change, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Please, at this time, raise your hand. Okay, those that don't want to speak, no. I counted about 8 of you. Are you all here, I'm assuming, for the Tobacco 21? Okay. Are all of you probably going to be speaking in favor of? Anybody speaking in opposition of? Okay. When we get to that item, which will be coming up here shortly, we will ask that you come up. We'll go through it again, but we'll ask that you come up, identify yourselves, have a seat, and then give us your name and address, and then we will go from there. Next, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any item whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 7 and concludes with the resolution on page 23 and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $7,500. To compliance testing for generator emissions testing for $12,550. The following license renewals: temporary peddler permit to TNT Fireworks for 612 South Minnesota from 6/20/18 to 12/5/18. To temporary gambling license to the Ducks Unlimited at Gustavus Adolphus for 229 Nassau for March 24th, 2018, a consumption and display permit for Nicollet County Ag Society for 400 West Union, and I'm thinking, Barb, that this is probably from 4/1/18 to 3/31/19?
That'd be my guess.
Yeah, 3/31/19 with that change. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for February 21, 2018 through March 7, 2018. Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion?
Question.
Yeah.
Todd, can you explain to me what is on page 22? Is that part of the consent agenda?
It is not part of the consent agenda. It might look just a little bit different, but it is essentially the bill list and what funds are being tapped to pay the bills that are included on the 20 pages or so before that.
Why does that look different than?
It's a different report font. It's a little bit different style. There was an update in the software, and so it makes it, the font is different.
Okay.
It's also the combination of the last year's bills and this year's.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Still paying some from last year.
Yeah.
Got you. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Now, any more questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwame.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next, we have unfinished business, which there is none, and the first item under new business is a street vacation request for Myrtle Street. And Russ.
They're going to get me in stereo tonight here. Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, you're asked tonight to consider a petition submitted by the Nicollet County Board of Commissioners seeking the partial vacation of Myrtle Street right-of-way. The portion they are seeking to vacate would lie east of the Front Street, South Front Street right-of-way. The road, as it is constructed now, only extends about a half block towards the river, where it is ended by the levee. So Nicollet County is petitioned to vacate that portion of Myrtle Street. They do own the residentially zoned, the two properties on either side of Myrtle Street. The property north of Myrtle Street is zoned at this point Central Business District. The property south of Myrtle Street is zoned RP1. Tonight would be the first step of a three-step process the county would request, and this would be the vacation of the roadway. Subject to your approval, should it be granted, they would then next seek to rezone part of the right-of-way and the residential property south of Myrtle Street to Central Business District, which would match the residential property north of Myrtle Street. Should that action be granted, the county would likely then continue and seek a conditional use permit to construct a off-street parking facility to accommodate their county courthouse operations. The Planning Commission, subsequent to a public hearing of which notice was provided by statute, the Planning Commission has recommended that you grant the partial vacation as petitioned by Nicollet County. I will note that Public Works have reviewed the matter as to the utilities, and it would not adversely impact our ability to serve that area with utilities. There is one electrical service upon the property that could reasonably be accommodated to move, should they move forward with the courthouse project. I've sent notice to the private utilities. The only one that responded would be CenterPoint, and they've indicated that the requested vacation would not impact their operations. And if you don't hear back from the other ones, the assumption is that they would not be impacted by that also. The roadway really serves no purpose other than to serve those two residential properties. It extends into the floodplain. It does not provide any planned connectivity. There's no plan to extend Myrtle Street with a bridge into Kasota. I believe the Planning Commission was of the opinion that it would be immaterial. So the Planning Commission, as I said, at their last meeting did recommend that you grant the requested petition. There is a map showing the extension. There are other roadways that are undeveloped in the floodplain, Market Street and then River Street. I will note that the county was asked to assemble a campus master plan, so we'd have some notice. We were kind of taken by surprise somewhat when the theater was demolished and then Human Services building was built in there. For example, Gustavus Adolphus, their master plan, we knew very well years ahead of time where the new football field was going to be constructed. We knew there was a planned expansion of Nobel Hall. So it gives the Planning Commission some comfort that there's some forethought into this, and we're following a rational series of steps. Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or members of the council might have.
Questions? Russ, I have one. In your memo, it says that they purchased these properties at 535 South Front and 601 South Front, and the structures have been demolished, which is true. But to the east, which would have been a Myrtle Street location, there still remains a two-car garage.
Yeah, they're using that right now for storage for the sentence to serve.
But is that on the plans and everything I saw, it showed it all parking? Is that going to be removed?
I'm not aware of that, Mr. Mayor. We certainly have those answers as to the go through with the conditional use process.
All right. I was just kind of curious because
the county administrator is here. Perhaps if you'd like, he could come up here and answer your question.
Ryan, do you have an answer for that yet, or am I premature?
Right, if I could, I'll have you come up. Since we put these on YouTube and everything, they'll want to be able to hear you.
Yeah, Ryan, if you could first identify yourself and your home address,
Sure,
please.
Ryan Crush, Nicollet County Administrator. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we'd prefer to keep the garage for storage. Right now, the sentence to serve is using it for storage. If that is a problem in relation to the conditional use permit, we could certainly proceed with removing that. So.
Well, it was just my question because the maps that Russ or whoever had provided showed it nothing there, and I was just kind of curious what it would be.
Sure.
And if you could, Ryan, too, if you could give us your home address
Oh,
for the record. so
Sure.
we have it.
225 Red Ridge Road, Good Thunder,
All right.
Minnesota.
We won't come and see you. It's
All
just
right.
that we want to, for our record to be in. Okay. Yep. Sorry.
I have a question also. I know it's early in the process, and this isn't part of that, but eventually there will be a parking lot there. And I'm wondering what the county's plans are for runoff for the parking lot. It's right next to the river. It's really hard to provide any sort of mitigation or treatment for it. The county is in a position with a lot of their constituents out in the rural parts of the county on water and what happens to it and how it's treated before it runs into streams. And we don't want this to be an example of just untreated water running into the rivers. And I assume you're working with with our Public Works, with Pete, come up with something reasonable for that.
Right. We've had ISG Engineering has put together a preliminary sketch or plan for a parking lot, and if we move forward to the conditional use process, we'll certainly work with the city Public Works on putting in whatever stormwater retention or drainage that we need. We're fully anticipating having to do that.
Any other questions? Steve?
Russ, this is directed towards you. You'll have to excuse me. I don't understand. When in the past, when we've talked about floodplain, we've always talked about, well, we can't do any development on the floodplain. Can you explain to me what rules and policies the state of Minnesota has, or the city, relative to development on a floodplain?
Yeah, generally, Councilman Grahams, it would prohibit any type of residential or occupied structures, parking lots, park facilities, a Frisbee golf disc course. Those can be created within the floodplain. We always consult with Bolton and Mank. They've got specialists on their staff, and so they help us to make sure that we're permitting processes that are appropriate. They may have to raise the parking lot a little bit, add some fill in there, but we'll make sure that it meets all of the floodplain regulations. But generally, if you're in that area, you've got to raise it up a foot above the floodplain. So that's why you're seeing some houses now in New Jersey after the hurricane over there being built up on stilts.
So if I understand what you're saying, if a house were to be demolished, another house couldn't be built on that area?
Unless you raised it a foot above the floodplain. Now, we've got the
Okay.
levee, which provides some protection back there. So, but yeah, it's very, very complicated rules, Councilman Grahams, and that's why I always rely on Mr. O'Brien at Bolton and Mike.
All right, okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Ed. Excuse me.
Just out of curiosity, you talked about the 3 different permits you need. Why don't you just do them all at once, or is there a mandatory waiting?
Well, there's a
period?
procedural step, because until you get something vacated,
So
yeah.
it was just-
Yep,
just
it is a 3-month process. So there'll be 3 planning commission actions, 2 city council actions, and 1 board of zoning appeals action. And Ryan and I have a timeline set up, so we'll make sure everything gotten to me, so I can get the notice into the paper, and we can give the notice to the residents as required. So we've looked well into the future, and I think it was, what, May?
Right.
It was May, it gets wrapped up.
Anyone else? Ryan, I have a question, and I don't know if you can answer this one yet. I know, being a former county employee, coming out of that parking lot on the east side and the back there, it was always treacherous with cars parked along there. When this gets built, are you planning to have a no parking, or has the city talked to you about that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, part of our purpose with this is to try to reduce the amount of on-street parking on Front Street.
Right.
There's a lot of traffic there, as you know, and sometimes excessive speeds, and we want, for the safety of the employees and the constituents using the building, we want to try to remove the off-street parking there, so we'll work with the city when we get to the point of developing the actual parking lot.
Okay.
Of trying to eliminate some of those spots, and we also want to try to be good neighbors to the houses that are still in that area. And on several days, especially court days, it seems like there's a lot of vehicles parked on the streets in front of people's houses, and we want to be respectful of their privacy and try to eliminate that as well.
Okay.
And we'd intend then, your staff, to work with Public Works and Chief Peters to make some assessments, Mayor, on whether it would be appropriate. If you take the cars off the street, you might increase the speeds of the cars traveling down the street. Again, you're kind of squeezing the corridor psychologically, so, but we'd turn it over to Chief Peters and Public Works, and they'd kind of make some decisions or recommendations to you folks.
Yeah, the west side of that street is to me more dangerous than the east side is, so maybe compromise or something in there would work. So anyway, anybody else? The resolution approving the vacation of a portion of Myrtle Street right-of-way as petitioned by the Nicollet County Board of Commissioners appears on pages 28 and 29. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second it.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Quimby?
Aye.
Mayor Zeno?
Aye.
Councilmember Garland?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And Brian. Appreciate it. Next up, we have the tobacco 21 regulations. And Todd, you want to introduce this?
Yeah, let me do the staff report, and then as you have people that want to participate, you'll recognize them as you talked about at the beginning of the meeting. The information is provided in your packet starting on page 30, and this is based on a few discussions that the council has had both at workshops and at goal-setting sessions. The direction that was given to staff, I hope, was pretty clear and hopefully articulated well here. I think it's been the council's position that it's probably not something that you want to see, to have St. Peter be an island unto itself related to the age of sale for tobacco. And so you've had discussion that you'd certainly be interested in seeing that on a statewide level, but at a minimum on a regional level, regional being Mankato, North Mankato, and the city of St. Peter. So based on that, direction was given to staff to prepare and start a process moving this forward. To be clear, there are state statutes related to notification of the public and of license holders who have the ability to sell cigarettes legally within St. Peter. So frankly, even if you wanted to pass an ordinance change tonight that modified the age, you could not do that. You have to provide 30 days notice in advance to those license holders as to when you're going to be discussing or looking to take action on that issue. What you see included in your packet is a resolution that is really direction to staff. And so it kind of works like this. If Mankato and North Mankato take action before the end of 2019, staff is directed to start the process. In other words, provide notice, have the draft ordinance ready to go, and establish a date that meets all of the notification and statutory requirements for your action. And that's really what we're trying to do as a part of the draft of the resolution. Also included is specific language, and I think it's important to point that out, is that from a staff perspective, it's important as we provide notice to folks that the language be very tied down within a very narrow band, because if we're looking to provide notice and tell people what you're interested in discussing, you need to identify that very clearly, and I hope we do that as a part of the information that's included in your packet. Really, we're looking at a couple of different things, one of which is to change the age under which sale would not be allowed. So that's 21 and over, it is allowed. Under 21, it would not be allowed. This is not a criminalization of possession or use under the age of 21. This strictly has to do with the age that sale is allowed. The second item that the city attorney has brought forward, which I think has been thought out very well, is it also modifies your rules related to using ID. So your ordinance currently says that if you use a fake ID, you can't do that, but your ordinance has an age tie to it as well. And so currently it says 18, so that would need to be modified as well to age 21, and I think that's articulated again in the information that's in your packet. So again, to be clear, tonight there is not action on the table to change your ordinance. The resolution contemplates that you're directing staff that if Mankato and North Mankato take action to modify their sale age to 21, that staff is directed to start the process here by doing the notification based on the language that's in place. One other small thing to mention is that I did have someone contact me and say, well, what's the December 2019 date? The December 2019 date was brought up by the City Council as really an opportunity to, let me think of the right word, to ensure that only the sitting council would act on this. After 2019, there's the potential for a new city council. There's an election in the time frame, and it will be a new city council. So this direction, the resolution would sunset, essentially, the direction to the staff would sunset at the end of 2019. So that's why the 2019 date is in there. There are a number of ways you could slice and dice this resolution. My hope is we don't get too far afield from this. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, you really can't pass an ordinance on this issue tonight without notification. So anyway, that's the report. Information's included in your packet, and the resolution, including the proposed language that's necessary, is on page 33 and 34.
All right. Next, we will address people that indicated they wanted to speak, and if you didn't raise your hand, that's fine too. You can come up. What we're trying to do is limit your comments to 5 minutes. As I told some of you, this is not a public hearing, it's an open meeting, so we may engage with some questions for you while you're here. So whoever wants to come up first and get started, we can go.
Again, name and address would be great.
I've been duly voted off the island to come up first and speak to you. Good evening, my name is Carl Larson, 1302 Rock Bend Parkway. I'm here tonight in my capacity as the president of the Minnesota Society for Public Health Education. Minnesota SOFI, as we call it, is a professional organization that focuses on education and advocacy committed to improving the health status of the people of Minnesota. As you might guess, I'm here to offer my support and some rationale for Tobacco 21. My comments tonight really focus on three primary areas. I'm not going to fill your head with a bunch of statistics and data about use. I have a feeling some of my friends and colleagues may provide a lot of that information. Really what I'm here to talk about is first the public health need for this sort of law. Second, to address, second and third, quite frankly, to address some of the counter arguments that are generally made related to a policy like this. One is the violation of liberties argument, and the other is the paternalism argument. And so I will take just a little bit of time on each one of those tonight. First, and briefly, the public health call. Since 1964, when the first Surgeon General report came out about smoking, there have been over 20 million premature deaths in the United States related to tobacco use. I think people are very familiar with that. I think people are familiar with the idea that 480,000 die every year of tobacco-related causes. Just as a perspective, that means we would eliminate everyone in the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. In one fell swoop, whoosh, that's everybody who would go. We know that tobacco companies have been focusing on children for a long time. How do we know that? Well, 95% of all smokers start before the age of 21. 88% start before the age of 18. We use flavors, we use cartoons, we use anything they can possibly use to attract children to tobacco use. The real challenge here is that the research shows that adolescents are more susceptible to addiction than are adults because of their level of development. And so tobacco companies know this. If they get you young, they've got you for life. Hence the need for public health policy. The key to reducing youth smoking has always been reductions in access. That's been the most effective thing across the board for 30 years. Unfortunately, nearly 2/3 of all youth between the ages of 12 and 17 who use tobacco products have indicated that they've given money to a peer who's old enough to buy for them. And so we also know that most adolescents, in fact the overwhelming number of adolescents, do not have people in their peer group over the age of 21. So if the ban at the age of 21 makes sense, the law to set the law at 21 makes sense, because that's where the break happens in the peer group. The key really is to stop initiation, and laws like this work. Second point, you will undoubtedly hear or have already heard claims that laws like this violate civil liberties or some civil liberties. Routine comparisons are often made to having a right to vote, or joining the military, or getting married, and so on and so forth. Tobacco differs from these things in significant ways. While some people experience short-term pleasure from tobacco use, tobacco has been shown to harm virtually every single person exposed to it over time. This applies to none of the other civil liberties that it is generally compared to. Using tobacco as it's designed is a designation to kill. If you use it the way it's built, it kills people. None of the other civil liberties, if practiced, are innately designed to do such a thing.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Get about a minute.
Thank you. The benefit of the law simply outweighs the limit on the liberty. I'll take just my last minute to talk about this idea of paternalism, the idea that government should just keep its nose out of everybody's business. Under most circumstances, I might actually agree with that, but not in this particular case. The main reason for the argument for paternalism, if you will, has to do with developmental level of youth. Some areas of brain development are done by the age of 21. You can understand what a consequence is. You can process information. You can reason. The parts of the brain that aren't done are the parts that have to do directly with addiction, impulse control, susceptibility to peer influence, sensation seeking, reward seeking. None of that's fully developed at the age of 21. In fact, is not developed in most people until the age of 25. So I will stop there, encouraging the council really to take the lead on this. You have a very unique position to not fall victim to the idea that we can't stand alone. We can stand alone. There's no reason we can't take the lead. Other towns will follow if somebody takes the lead, and it doesn't have to be Mankato. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Name and address, please, and instead of interrupting, if you want to, when you see this, it means you have about a minute left.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Robert Gazzola. I'm a family practice physician. I reside at 1901 Orchard Ridge here in St. Peter. Dr. Erickson did a fantastic job sort of setting the table, and yeah, I do think much of this will sound repetitive, but I really think that a couple major points that he made do warrant emphasizing. Number one, St. Peter has at least the way it sounds, has this sort of platform such that if Mankato were to go, Mankato, North Mankato, it wouldn't be much of an issue. You guys were going to nod your head and say, yep, we're on this. And I think because it's the right choice. And I think, I would guess at the end of the day, most of us would say, yeah, it makes great sense. We shouldn't be selling cigarettes to 18-year-olds because they filter down so easily to your 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds. I was just talking to a gentleman earlier this evening. He started smoking when he was in 3rd grade, got cigarettes from his sister who was like 14 or 15, who got them from a friend who was a bit older. He regrets to this day the fact that he started smoking. And as a physician, I see patients every single day who smoke, every single day. And maybe not every single one, but I promise 90+% wish they didn't. And wishing they didn't and knowing that those who start at a younger age are much more apt to continue and go down that path to, unfortunately, significant poor health issues. I think we should do what we can to block that starting when they are so young. As Carl has said, our brains are different when we're 14 and 16 and 17 versus when we're in our mid-20s. And that tendency for us to develop addictive habits is much greater if we start a substance when we are much younger. And I think that's where we've got to be bold enough to say, you know what, yeah, Mankato, North Mankato, they're not making this choice. And really it comes down to 1 or 2 people on a council to sway things one way or another. But I don't think that as a community, it's wrong for us to take a stand. And I think there's probably this notion, and I think it's a true notion, that the state eventually will probably pass a 21-year-old. That's great, right? And that'll make it easier for us. But I also think cities who've taken that step forward to make a stand, they stand out. And I don't know why St. Peter wouldn't want to be one of those cities to say, hey, yeah, we can do this, and we'll do this for our kids. One of the things, too, the kids most affected, the adolescents who are most apt to start smoking are kids who have lower self-esteem. They're less involved in their school and academic achievement. They have fewer skills to resist the offers of their peers, and they come often from homes of lower socioeconomic status. And you know, you talk about the risks of being paternalistic. Well, I think, you know what, if we can help these kids who need help and who, you know, maybe we can avoid going down the road of addiction, because, you know, one addiction often does beget other addictions. So if we can help anybody, I'm all in favor of that. Yeah, I guess, you know, I mean, I can go on. As I said, so many of my patients have suffered the ill effects of smoking. I've seen that destroy families. I've seen that destroy, you know, I can see one patient who comes in pretty regularly, and she is just so frail and can't attend grandchildren's sporting events because she's got to carry her oxygen wherever she goes. She can't walk more than, you know, 40, 50 feet before she got to stop and rest. It's a sad thing, and I promise you, she would give anything not to have started when she was, I think she was 14. I don't have anything else to say. If you guys have any questions, be happy to respond. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Cecily Polzin. I live at 416 West Myrtle Street. I had a long commute here this evening. As I said, my name is Cecily Polzin, and I support raising the tobacco sale to age 21 in St. Peter, and this is why. I don't usually use notes, so excuse me. It makes me actually more nervous to do this. I grew up in St. Peter. I have raised 4 children here, 3 of which are adults now. One of which is she smoked, doesn't anymore. I have a teenage daughter who attends high school here in St. Peter. And because of that, I feel like I have a strong commitment to the health of this community. I also work for the Mankato Clinic, but I'm speaking as a mother this evening. I have witnessed firsthand how tobacco has impacted my closest family members. I felt the fear and the heartache of watching the people closest to me suffer with very serious health issues, all because they started smoking when they were young. Back in the days, when this person started smoking, it wasn't known that tobacco was as dangerous as it is. I've experienced the frustration and the anger and the regret for not being able to stop until the damage to their bodies was already done. But now we know how dangerous tobacco is, and I'm here to request, excuse me, that you raise the tobacco sale age to 21. Now, I know that I'm in the dark about many things that my teenage daughter Grace is pressured to do and try. In the whole scheme of things, vaping or even smoking might seem like the least of my worries. That is until I look into her future, the known and the unknown of what these new tobacco products can and will possibly do to her. Will it impact her, or will the impact come later when she has a family and loved ones that depend on her? Will she be self-reliant, or will tobacco take such a toll on her that she will rely on others to take care of her needs? Our kids don't always know what is best for them, even though they think they do. I have one at home that told me such before I left tonight. As adults, we need to assure them that in this case, raising the age sale for tobacco products to 21 is what is best for their future and the future of their children and their grandchildren and so on. I want my teenage daughter's future to be bright and unencumbered with regret of making choices that she really wasn't old enough to understand the implications of. The statistics show that teen tobacco use is not a thing of the past. Tobacco use among teens has risen for the first time since the Minnesota Health Department started tracking youth tobacco use. We need to do more to stop the tobacco industry from attracting teens to trying and using tobacco and addicting more teens through their aggressive marketing. We need to take stronger steps to keep young people from easy access to tobacco products. Raising the sale age for tobacco products to 21 is projected to reduce the number of 15 to 17-year-olds who start using tobacco by 25%, according to the National Academy of Medicine. In Minnesota alone, tobacco use claims more than 6,000 lives and results in over $3 billion in excess health care costs every year. That's the big picture. I see the personal picture up close in the faces of the people I love most in the world. Those people whose lives will never be the same because of tobacco, and those people who are saddened by the toll it has taken. I'm asking you to do more to stop the tobacco industry from capturing today's young people as tomorrow's customers. Raising the sale age to 21 will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Keith Stelter. I live at 355 North Welco Drive. Thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to speak about Tobacco 21, and thank you for being willing to consider this important health issue. These discussions tonight will bring this initiative forward. So tonight, I actually come to you for support and assistance in the spirit of serving my patients. I know you are all familiar with many of the health-related facts about tobacco, and I will not repeat those to you again, except for one fact that I recently learned about that might surprise you, and I'm working in the area of opioid addiction. Tobacco addiction is actually one of the biggest reasons why people who become addicted to opioids are not able to successfully complete treatment and stay with their sobriety against opioids. We know that tobacco addiction changes the brain structure in such a way that makes opioid addiction even worse. We know this now based on functional MRI findings of patients who are trying to overcome their opioid addiction. Because of this, and because of all the other reasons that are more commonly known, I firmly believe that Tobacco 21 would make a substantial benefit to the lives of all Americans, but particularly our young citizens. It is my dream that Tobacco 21 will be as common sense as using car seats for our children or not smoking on airplanes. When those initiatives were brought forward for the first time, they may have seemed like kind of outlandish and needless and restricting the rights of certain people. But now we as a society would never go back to allowing children to ride unrestrained in a car or to have so-called smoking seats in airplanes. And I certainly understand the reluctance of any individual city government to act in a manner in contrast to their neighboring communities. But I fully believe that the best solution to Tobacco 21 is not only a statewide solution, but probably a national solution as well. This would assure that the health of all Americans, but also protect the rights of businesses who sell tobacco near state borders. I'm hopeful that our discussion tonight and the discussions in other communities will spur our state and national representatives and senators to take up this issue with seriousness. Unfortunately, these levels of government are, at times, much more driven by political ideology than best practice. So far, a few cities in Minnesota have stepped out of the mainstream and have made the bold move to restrict tobacco sales to those under 21. I obviously feel that as a progressive city, St. Peter should be one of those communities, and if not now, in the near future. As you can imagine, I was disappointed to hear when the Mankato City Council voted down Tobacco 21, when potentially we could have had a solution for regionally. I want to thank you again for listening to my thoughts and concerns. My job as a physician can generally only treat problems once they occur or advise patients on best personal health habits. You, however, have the authority to go upstream, as we say in public health, create the best environment for a healthy community through actions like funding parks, walking paths, safe street designs, and supporting ordinances like Tobacco 21. Thank you.
Questions? Dr. Stelter, I do have a question for you, sorry. You had mentioned the states. I think there's 5 states now that are Tobacco 21. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm looking for a feeling here. These 3 of those 5 states also allow recreational marijuana.
Right. Yeah.
The contradiction really kind of baffles me a little bit. You know, I mean, we're talking about addictions,
right,
and still they're allowing that. I guess what is the Tobacco 20? I can about imagine, but what's the Tobacco 21 view overall, and how does that relate to the addiction for other things like opioids?
Well, yeah, marijuana definitely changes the brain structure of youth, just as tobacco does. We know that as well. You know, sometimes I guess all I could say is that you can't make sense of what some state governments do sometimes. It just doesn't make sense to me that would be, you know, occur in the same state. Right. That you'd have legalized recreational marijuana and restrict tobacco use.
Yeah, I didn't look. Do you know, does anybody know what the legal age is for the recreational marijuana? Is that 21? 21. 21. It's okay
in those
for
states
them.
Like Colorado.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
So, all right, thank you.
Everyone knew.
Everyone knew except me.
Come on. I didn't know.
I didn't know.
I know you did.
Helen, if we could have your name and address, please. And I apologize. I told you we would get started at 7:15, and it was 7:15 and 30 seconds
That's
when we
okay.
got started. So.
Helen Baumgartner, and I live at 1214 Pine Point Curve. I'm going to try to shorten this a little bit. As voter service chair of the St. Peter Area League of Women Voters, I'm going to be testifying on that organization's position on efforts to support chemical health in our youth. In September of 2017, President of the Minnesota League of Women Voters, Terry Khalil, gave the following testimony at her own city council's meeting in Detroit Lakes. And the LWV St. Peter area concurs with this. Ms. Khalil stated, "The League of Women Voters Minnesota, a nonpartisan educational and political organization, has a 98-year history of advocating on behalf of children. As far back as 1999, our members studied, came to consensus, and support the following position on smoking." And there are 6 points here. LWV in Minnesota supports educational programs that advance improved chemical health. Specifically, we support ongoing anti-smoking programs starting in the elementary school, continuing in middle and high school. Regular continuing education for adult educators, coaches, and school administrators. Alternatives to suspension for alcohol and tobacco violations in the schools. Allocation of public funds for state and community initiatives to prevent illegal alcohol and tobacco use. Consistent city and school guidelines for adults who chaperone youth activities. And state laws, city ordinances, and law enforcement efforts designed to promote chemical health and reduce illegal alcohol and tobacco use. So, as the City Council addresses the public health problem of smoking, the League of Women Voters Minnesota strongly encourages the Council to be a leader among municipalities, which we're all asking you to do, by enacting strict ordinances to protect the long-term health of our youth. signed by Terry Khalil, President, League of Women Voters, Minnesota, adapted by Lynn Solo, President, League of Women Voters, St. Peter area, and tweaked by me. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
I have another copy here. Would somebody like the statement?
If you want to
Yep.
hand it to anyone, and we'll get it in the right spot, Helen.
Just give it to Ed over there, and we'll pass it down. Go, Todd's got it. Name and address, please.
I'm Susan Clank. Oh, can you hear me? I'm Susan Clank. I'm a family practice physician here at the Daniels Clinic in St. Peter. My address is 1011 Timber Ridge Trail in Eagle Lake, but I've been a physician here in the St. Peter area for 15 years. So I will spout off some stats and then also just discuss how smoking affects my practice. As you heard, 90% of adult smokers smoke their first cigarette before the age of 18. 90% of adult smokers started by the age of 21. I personally see patients in my office who have started smoking as low as the age of 5, 6 years old, all the way up until their teenage years. And as Bob spoke to, there's probably a chunk of those patients that regret that they ever started smoking. Often those cigarette smokers can admit that they enjoy it. And that, I think, is what we need to start early, because the earlier these patients start, the more that's going to be affecting their brain chemistry and the likelihood of them becoming addicted. It's rather interesting, when I was looking up some stats, the prevalence of cigarette smoking actually has declined from 1997 down to 2013. But actually teens now probably use more forms of tobacco, such as chewing and also vaping, as you've heard about. I saw there was a survey of middle and high school students in the U.S. 7% of middle schoolers and 20% of high school students reported using some form of nicotine product. 40% of youth in the U.S. who smoke use flavored cigars or cigarettes. And e-cigarette consumption has increased over the last probably 6 years, and this has become the most commonly used tobacco product. 37% of high school students have ever tried an e-cigarette, and that is up 33% from 2014. So as a mother of teenagers, I found that very startling. And people, or adolescents actually, who have tried e-cigarettes are twice as likely to start smoking in the future. And I don't have to tell you about that nicotine is incredibly addictive. Within days and weeks of even using occasional cigarettes, one can show signs of dependence. There was another study I saw that among 6th graders who smoked once a month at baseline, 50% of them experienced symptoms of nicotine dependence, and 40% escalated to daily smoking during the next 4 years. Therefore, if we can certainly increase the age gap between those that can purchase legally, this will help to decrease the number of children who will start. So research shows there's a 25% reduction in smoking initiation among 15 and 17-year-olds following the increase to age 21. So St. Peter has always seemed to me to be a very progressive community, a community that attracts and retains young families. As a physician, I have seen what tobacco can do to the health of a community. It is sobering how much tobacco-related disease that we see on an everyday basis. As a family practice physician, I practice that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And not only as a physician, but as a parent of 2 teenage boys, I certainly want to try to do everything to protect the health of my children. So St. Peter, I feel, should also try to do everything it can to protect the health of its youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address.
Hello, Nissa Fell, and I live at 225 College Avenue. I'm here because I'm a mom, like Dr. Clank mentioned. I have kids who are younger than that. They're almost 3, 6, and 8. And right now, they're very influenced by their parents and our beliefs, but I know that that is not always the case, and they'll start hanging out with older kids or have friends that have older siblings and be exposed to things that I cannot protect them from. And so, therefore, I want every community, I want the state legislation to go through, but first and foremost, I want St. Peter to be a leader. I don't want them to worry about what cities or states have already done this. I want us to take a stand and be a leader and do this because we know it is right for our community, and we are a young, growing, vibrant community, and we want that to continue. I'm also here because I'm a granddaughter and a niece from a grandfather and uncle who died horrific deaths from tobacco-related illness. And on his deathbed, my uncle looked at his wife and said, "I really screwed up." He was bald, he was frail, he could hardly catch a breath, and he died the most horrific death I would ever want anyone to go through. I don't want anyone to experience that as a person or a family member watching it. I'm a community member. I think St. Peter is amazing. I grew up in Mankato, and when I moved back to this area, I made a very specific decision to come to St. Peter because I loved what St. Peter had to offer. I think St. Peter is better than some of these other communities. We don't need to be the follower of Mankato. We can be the leader in the region. Why not be the leader for Eagle Lake and for Cleveland and for the smaller communities around us so that they start doing what St. Peter's doing because we've got it together. And then finally, I'm a nurse practitioner at Gustavus. So like all of the fabulous healthcare providers that have already spoken, there are statistics out there like you wouldn't believe. We know tobacco kills people. Government makes a lot of money off tobacco, so I don't think big government is really going to put the kibosh on tobacco altogether and make it illegal, but we can start taking steps to make it harder and harder for people to access it, thus reducing the addiction and the use of tobacco products. Also, Gustavus last week, nobody really knows this outside of a few people at Gustavus, but Gustavus is going to be becoming a tobacco-free college and campus, which is extremely exciting. We have passed that through the President's Cabinet, and we are going to be bringing it to the Board of Trustees for their final blessing, but it looks like starting next academic year, Gustavus is taking a stand among many other colleges and universities across Minnesota that it is not okay. And our clients, our students at Gustavus are 18 to 22-year-olds. This is the age that we're talking about. These are the people that we are trying to prevent access to. So if St. Peter can go tobacco 21 as well, it just continues to support that community effort that our youth mean something to us, and we're really, really willing to give them all they have to get through this life. Thanks.
Anybody have any questions? I just want a comment. You know, you said something about your uncle was bald, and I'm going to try not to take that personally.
My
husband's
husband's
bald.
bald.
That he was
My
bald.
husband's bald by choice, but
Okay, all right.
my uncle had really good hair, so to see him bald,
All right.
yeah.
Well, I was just wondering because I'm going to take it personally. Name and address, please.
I'm Leah Mote, and I'm at 800 College Avenue. Good evening. My name is Leah Mote, and I'm a student in my senior year at Gustavus Adolphus College. Tonight, I'd like to share my support for the Tobacco 21 ordinance, which would raise the selling age of tobacco from 18 to 21. My education at Gustavus has taught me to believe in facts, to pursue justice, to act on my beliefs, and to work towards the betterment of my community. And these are the values that bring me here tonight. The Tobacco 21 ordinance is the perfect moment to demonstrate my conviction in preventative health promotion, to encourage the town of St. Peter to act individualistically as a promoter of social and political change, and to speak up with the intention of helping my local community keep my own generation tobacco-free. But I represent more than just my institution tonight. I also represent the age group that is directly impacted by this legislation. When my grandpa joined the service at age 18, he began to smoke, and he continued to smoke through most of his adult life, including after he was married and had 3 children. All those years of smoking left their impact, first with his diagnosis of lung cancer, and then with my grandma's, which was due entirely to secondhand smoke. My grandpa was just about my age when he picked up smoking, and he's not alone. The American Lung Association has found that 95% of adult smokers started before the age of 21. I've seen firsthand how decisions I make at this stage in life can affect me and my loved ones far into the future. I plan to make smart decisions now, and am passionate about helping my peers to do the same. As someone who is involved in college campus health initiatives, I see a lot of risky health behavior among my peers. But perhaps none seems so clearly preventable as stopping tobacco dependency before it can begin. The many impacts of tobacco on our short and long-term health, our economic stability, our social status, our mental health, and our increased risk of dependency on other substances are all factors that truly matter to me and to my peers. By raising the age of legal tobacco purchase from 18 to 21, we are not only protecting young adults today, but we'll be protecting their futures and the lives of their future families. I appreciate the opportunity to share my support for the Tobacco 21 ordinance with you all tonight, and look forward to watching St. Peter act with distinction by raising the tobacco purchasing age from 18 to 21.
Thank you. Name and address, Mary.
Good evening. Mary Hildebrandt, 204 North 5th Street in St. Peter. Thank you for entertaining this conversation tonight. Wow, isn't this exciting? We've got so many people here who are just so passionate about their feelings about tobacco, and I'm one of them. I'll keep my comments fairly short. In thinking about Tobacco 21, tobacco use continues to be the leading cause of preventable death. Preventable means there's something we can do about it. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death, and cancer is second. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is #3. 80% of that is attributed to smoking or tobacco use. Nearly 90% of smokers started before the age of 21, according to the National Drug Use and Health Survey. You've heard that statistic over and over and over again tonight. It's so important to remember that. I'm not sure we could ever get ahead of tobacco companies, but we can give our youth a little more time before deciding to take up the habit. Tobacco companies spend nearly $1 million per hour on advertising tobacco. Flavored products target youth. E-cig Crib in Mankato used to advertise over 350 flavors. A Tobacco 21 policy may prevent future addiction by limiting youth to products in their impressionable and experimental years. The tobacco industry knows they must hook new customers to replace those who die or quit. The tobacco industry also knows that nearly 95% of addicted adult smokers started by age 21. So they must capture their new customers young. Their customers. That's quite a thing to call tobacco users. The potential impact on retail is a point of conversation. We can weigh the impact of healthcare cost versus retail. The emotional and physical devastation caused by tobacco-related diseases go way beyond any financial measure. Cigarette sales to those under 21 account for only 2.12% of total sales. And in Minnesota, smoking is responsible, again, you've heard this before, responsible for over 6,000 deaths and over $3 billion in excess medical expenditures annually. Blue Cross and Blue Shield gave us those numbers. St. Peter, we have the opportunity to lead the way for our region by adopting a T21 ordinance. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of looking further at an ordinance change. Good night and thank you.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Erin Simmons. I live at 52698 Valley View Circle in North Mankato. I work with the American Lung Association. I want to thank you for discussing this really important topic. This initiative has the opportunity to start saving lives today. More than 250 communities have already adopted this policy, the first a decade ago. Since adoption, they have seen a significant reduction in youth use. 102,000 Minnesota youth are projected to die of tobacco-related diseases. That's our kids. We, as you've heard, the most recent study from the Minnesota Department of Health indicates a substantial increase in youth tobacco use, the first we've seen in about 20 years' time. We've also received a nicotine advisory in just the last year or so here that indicates that even the smallest amount of nicotine starts impacting youth brain development, and those changes are long-lasting. We often talk about this really big number of $3.2 billion of healthcare costs here in Minnesota every year. That boils down to almost $600 for every man, woman, and child in this community every single year. For my family, that's approximately $3,500. Now you can calculate how many kids I have. We can do better than that for the next generation, but those changes have to start now. I urge you to not wait for Mankato. Take action by setting a high standard for health for the youth of St. Peter. Be an island, be an awesome island that puts youth first and sets a standard of health for the next generation. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you all for your comments. Does anybody have any questions or other comments? Discussion. I have a couple of things. You know, you brought up just St. Peter, not waiting for Mankato. I'm wondering if what was introduced in the legislature last week by 4 GOP representatives and 4 DFL representatives would have an influence on Mankato at this point, because I know some of the comments, or one of the comments over there, was that they were wondering why our local legislators did not introduce a bill. And now that a bill has been introduced, I'm wondering if maybe that vote might be able to be swayed from the 4 to 3 that they voted on, because that was some of the comments that I had heard and read on that situation. The other thing is, I received a lot of emails, and your passion is greatly needed, but I'm going to give you some advice in the future. If you are sending emails, and they're standard, they were all the same, a bunch of them, and they start out, I am a St. Peter resident, and at the bottom is a name with not a St. Peter address, but mainly North Mankato addresses, I would suggest you read your emails before you send them out, because it kind of loses effectiveness if you aren't doing that. So, just a thought. Anyone else?
I have a comment about whether we should be an island, vote on it ourselves, or whether we should make this contingent on Mankato doing something. And my thinking is that if we vote on it, and we pass it, and it's in the front page of the paper tomorrow, and then it kind of drifts away, and people lose sight of it, and it's not today's news anymore. If we pass something contingent on Mankato, every time we have a meeting with them, whether it's on stormwater, or it's on transportation, or it's on housing in the region, or anything like that, we can poke them and nudge them. You know, we are still waiting for you. You know, you haven't done that yet. You know, everybody wants you to do it. And to me, that seems more effective in getting them to make a change and make this a regional initiative.
Susie?
You know, I have to disagree with that, because I think that the same argument can be made if we were to raise the purchase age to 21. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to go back to Mankato and encourage them each and every time that we talk to them. I see your point that we give them a little more influence if we make this contingent upon their vote, but I think that maybe we exert a little more influence by making such a statement first and encouraging Mankato to follow along.
We are in a regional partnership. They talked to us and talked about us and about North Mankato and such before they did all of this. And you know, it's difficult to see individuals in our partner communities, individuals that we admire and respect in elected positions, who are struggling with what I see as moral clarity and moral courage on this issue. And I think the opportunity to bring this up to them all the time and remind them all the time that they are being remiss in this is a more effective strategy.
Steve?
Initially, when we've had these discussions at our workshops, I could truly understand the need for a regional approach to the 21. But, you know, after listening today, and then on my way over to a meeting this afternoon, I saw this young woman with a child. She's smoking a cigarette, and she blew the smoke in the child's face, and then they hugged this child, and it just about made me sick. So, listening to all the arguments, I have a tendency to lean towards Susan Garland. Typically, that's not the case, but tonight I see that it would be. So, if we are to vote on the resolution that's before us, I would have to vote no, and I think that we should go alone and take the 21 approach from just being island. And there's several words I heard tonight that really have struck me, and that's the word progressive. I've heard that at least 4 or 5 times, and I use that myself about St. Peter. I see what St. Peter has done when it comes to accessibility issues for people in wheelchairs, and I see Mankato struggling with it. So I just think that we are a progressive community, and I just can't vote the way it's currently presented.
You know, Stephen, rather than voting no on this, what if instead you offer an alternate motion that would send us on the 30-day, 90-day to get it passed now? If that passes, great. If it doesn't pass, well, then the other one is the best you could do. The reason I think that's a better way to do it is because when we do vote on whatever it is we vote to pass, it ought to be as unanimous as possible, because we are of mostly, I think, one mind, and I think that should be reflected in our vote.
Steve, the age of this person that was blowing smoke?
I'd say she was probably at least 22, but she started much younger, I could, just by the way she was acting. Yeah.
The way she blew the smoke?
Pardon me?
The way she blew the smoke, you could tell.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Yeah, she was blowing circles, yeah, right.
Yeah.
John, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not a parliamentarian, and I'll leave that up to you if you would be willing to entertain that and changing the wording on this particular resolution.
When the mayor's ready, I will offer a motion on behalf of Councilmember Grams.
Thank you.
How's that?
All right. Anyone else? Comments? Jeff?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate what everybody here tonight had said, that we all should be for a healthy St. Peter. We should all be for a healthy Minnesota, and a policy that influences young adults in a way that they can have time to make a healthy decision or a bad decision in a way that is still appropriate with keeping with their civil rights and that sort of thing. And I think this is it. I think we have the ability to be leaders, and we have the ability to bring North Mankato back to the table to probably pass something in the next few weeks, because I know there are a lot of people that are still pressuring Mayor Dean and the City Council in North Mankato to also act alone. And so I think these folks are also probably in that same camp. And I would have no problem going with you guys to North Mankato and Mankato to say the exact same thing as what you guys are saying tonight as well, because I think this should be a regional thing, and I think we do need regional leaders, and I think somebody's got to do it at some point. Somebody's got to make a stand. We have that ability tonight. Let's do it.
So you were advocating for just passing it without,
I advocate that we move towards ordinance change 30 days, 90 days.
Without the North Mankato contingency. Yeah, see, I disagree on that aspect of it, and nothing to do with the tobacco part of it. It has to do with the commerce part of it. And whether right or wrong, that's why the island effect does not work for me, because we're going to be scattering people, and I agree, you know, that they shouldn't be going and doing it anyway, but we do have businesses in this town that don't live off of these sales, but they're part of their sales, and we have an obligation to them also, and that's why I feel that way.
You know, when it comes down to the decision falling in favor of the health of potential smokers or the income generated from tobacco sales, I'm going to fall on the side of health. I respect that we have merchants in this town who serve very important roles and sell a lot of goods that we all use, and they also sell tobacco products. And I would be saddened for them to lose revenue. But at the same time, I'm not particularly concerned about them losing tobacco sale revenue. That is not an important factor for me. If you could argue that folks were driving to Mankato to pick up cigarettes and buy everything else too, and that there'd be a very considerable effect, that would be one thing. But 18 to 21-year-olds aren't doing the family grocery shopping most of the time. They're making a run to buy cigarettes and probably not a lot else. And so that is not an important factor for me. And I'm not out to vilify anybody. I understand everybody has their business and they are not, you know, I don't think that anyone selling those tobacco products is a terrible person, but it's more important to me that we protect youth from smoking.
Anyone else?
So what are you advocating?
Oh, I'm advocating that we consider an ordinance change independent of the other communities in the area.
Shoot, that's 3 of you.
It's 3.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's Wild Man over there.
Well,
he's new. We don't know what he thinks.
Did you have a comment, Ed?
I don't like being the island. I think the kids will drive to Mankato or wherever. I am a business manager in St. Peter. We don't sell cigarettes, and everybody should be 21 that's in there anyway. I don't like being an island because they will drive. They're gonna get them regardless. If we could get everybody to go, I would certainly like that better. If Mankato would go before we did.
We all go together. That's what I. Anyone else? Comments? John?
So on behalf of Councilmember Grams, I would like to move a resolution to replace the one that's in the packet that says that we start on the process 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to change our ordinance to limit the sale of tobacco in the city of St. Peter to those aged 21 and older.
To what was the days? I heard 3 numbers.
It's a process, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's a
Yeah, if I can, just to offer clarity, the resolution that's in your packet.
My resolutions require clarity?
Yes. For staff.
Oh.
I would suggest then that if that's the action that the council is interested in taking, that the 3rd whereas be eliminated within the resolution. The 4th whereas be eliminated. Item number 1, which says monitor the actions of, be eliminated, and the first sentence be set a date for council action to modify the city code as follows. Subdivision 7, city code, subdivision 2, subdivision 3, provide notice to all licensed sellers as directed in state statute, provide posted and published notice. And then item 2 would be at the option of the party making the motion that could stay or not stay, but without it, it becomes more clear and will follow statute. I don't want to, frankly, if you say 30 days, I haven't counted all the days in the calendar, so it might be 32, but to follow the process.
The timing required by under state statute.
Yep. So based on his motion, that would be for staff, the clarification in the resolution that's included in the packet on page 33 and 34.
If I may, that 3rd whereas, I understand the reasoning it was put in this original proposal and the reason we'd want to take it out. But I'd say that from the conversations here, everybody on the council still agrees with that statement. And so maybe it doesn't belong at that point in the resolution, but I think it should be somewhere in our statement that we still believe a regional approach is best, and we encourage our neighboring communities to consider or reconsider their stance on this issue as well.
And I might add to that, the folks at the state capitol have introduced House File 3532, a bipartisan approach to this. Should also be on notice that we're taking a stand on this as well. And so maybe that helps them make the case for a statewide.
Well, there are
solution.
cities already that have adopted this.
Yep.
So,
and if one more does it, that means it's still live.
Ed?
Todd, I know we heard from all these people tonight, and they did all a good job, but have you been contacted by any of the businesses on their opinions of this, or?
I have not, nor have I solicited any commentary. That would be part of the notice process under Minnesota statute.
Okay. I was just wondering if any of them voiced their opinion.
Not to me.
I think we all received an email from the retail, I did anyway, from the retail council.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that. And to me, I'll be honest, it wasn't a very compulsive argument that they gave.
And that's why I was just wondering if any of them had been down and approached Todd or anybody else personally.
No, any information that we received in writing or by email is forwarded to you. Any contact that we would have had, but I would have provided within the body of the information. And so you've seen my limit.
Steve, does that, what John started and Todd finished, does that seem to fit what you had in mind?
Yeah, I think John's use of grammar is much more sophisticated than mine.
Yeah, well, I disagree with that completely. So.
Okay, all right.
So anyway, do we?
So if I can, just for clarification, based on the commentary by Carlin, I don't know, you've had a motion, you don't have to have a second, but ultimately, in this instance, it would be appropriate for you to give clear direction to staff through passage of a resolution. That resolution could be removal of, whereas for, removal of item number 1 is stated, continuing to set the date for action through subdivision 7, subdivision 2, subdivision 3, provide notice of licensed tobacco to all licensed tobacco sellers, provide posted and published notice. That could be the resolution that would meet, at least I believe, the intent of the motion that Councilmember Kwame put forward.
All right. So we have that motion.
So under the rules, you would need a second for the motion to consider the resolution.
Yep.
I'll make a second to that motion.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Now, just to clarify, this is start the process right away.
This does start the process. I'd have to use my calendar and calculate out the dates. But what this does then ultimately is, as soon as all the notification requirements can be met, the ordinance that is included in this resolution, the ordinance modification, will be brought back to you for action. So this in and of itself does not change the law within St. Peter. There would be additional action needed at a future council meeting that is somewhere in excess of 30 days out where you could pass a modification to the ordinance.
This is just a resolution to.
This is directing staff to make it go forward.
Right. Okay. Any other questions?
Would this then be the last time we vote on this resolution?
This would be the last time that you vote on this resolution, but you would have to consider an ordinance.
We'd have to vote on the ordinance to be one more vote. Okay.
Yeah, there would have to be another vote to modify the ordinance.
Do all these kind people need to come back again and give their testimony?
We recorded it also. Okay, any other questions or comments? You know, I am going to vote in favor of this, but please get Mankato, do whatever you need to do to get them to come with. You know, you guys have a lot of influence. Hopefully, you know, you can have more. And, you know, with some of these other changes that have happened in the last week, you know, maybe that will help you. So, all right. Been a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grahams?
Aye.
Councilmember Kwame?
Aye.
Mayor Zimmern?
Aye.
Councilmember Garland?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Thank you for all of your comments and enthusiasm. Next up, we have a job description modification.
Mayor, members, although you did not have a meeting at your workshop, this item was on your workshop and none of you contacted me with substantial concerns. This is to put in place 2 new job descriptions for part-time employees within the Recreation Department. We already have people that function within these jobs. We already pay people to do this work. This is really to provide clarification related to the job duties and to help in the recruitment process. As you know, we use job descriptions of this type very predominantly in the hiring process. And so it provides additional clarification and support within that process. The first is a certified fitness instructor for older adults, and that is included on page 36 and 37. You'll also see on page 38 a noon hour basketball clerk. And so I think the descriptions and a little bit of information within the memo provides the data that you might need to look at these positions. Again, there's no budget impact from this. You already have people in these positions and they've been hired at what I might consider an ad hoc basis, looking to put some more structure and systematic review of applicants and job duties in place. The resolution within your packet starts on page 40 and provides for both of those positions, including their pay equity points as established in the system that you have in place as reviewed by me. Happy to answer any questions. Jane's here to talk about what these positions do if you have significant questions about that. I do also want to mention that you will note within these job descriptions that the essential functions, the essential psychological, situational, and the essential physical requirements are modified based on what we really believe. We just copied this. We don't need somebody who works the noontime basketball to be able to carry 100 pounds continuously all day. So we've really taken a close look at those and modified those appropriately.
Questions? John?
The job description for certified fitness instructor for older adults requires vaccinations for tetanus and hepatitis B. They protect the staff person. Since we're dealing with a population of older adults, why do we require vaccinations for communicable diseases as are required, for instance, for healthcare professionals?
John, we would not consider this a healthcare professional.
Well, I know, but I mean, they are dealing with that kind of population.
Mm-hmm.
People who work in nursing homes and such as that are required to have flu shots and I don't know what all, but we are dealing with the same sort of population. Why don't we require that of our professional?
I can't speak to your comment related to nursing homes requiring flu shots. I know there are some systems that have started to do that, but I can't say that that's universal.
And I don't know that's just flu shots. I mean, there are other things too.
Right. It is certainly something that if you want to include that in here, you certainly can.
Well, could
from
you,
my perspective, it's not something that's required from an OSHA standpoint or an employee standpoint.
No, it's not. If you could check on that and could get back to us, maybe we would we pass this the way it is tonight. Maybe consider modifying it based on what you find out.
John, I'm confident that if the council wanted to add those types of things to this job description, that is certainly within your purview to do. I would say that if you do it for these positions, there are probably other positions that are within your employee base that you could make a very similar argument for. Whether it's in the finance department, who comes in contact with many folks throughout the month.
Yeah, and so do people, the retail clerks selling tobacco.
Yep. I think that's the challenge.
But the school district employees dealing with preschool children, I mean, I'm sure there are requirements. I don't know what these requirements are. That's what I would like to find out.
I can certainly do some more research.
So I think we should pass this the way it is tonight, and you come back and we can modify it.
John's opened a can of worms here because I'm rereading the vaccinations section. I know, it's hard to believe. And I'm now confused by this statement here. So I thought I understood it the first time I read it. So I understood this as you are required to have vaccinations for tetanus and hepatitis B. But then that second statement makes it sound like hepatitis B is optional.
It is. It is
Okay.
not required.
So that first sentence, so as a list of essential requirements, the first sentence is receive vaccinations for tetanus and hepatitis B. That's not actually.
It's contrary.
That's not actually an
Fair.
essential requirement.
Fair.
And I say this just because there might be somebody who reads that and cares, so I don't know how we want to rephrase that, if you want to require hepatitis B or not require it, but the two sentences seem to be
incongruent.
Right.
So I would modify that to say receive vaccinations for tetanus. Vaccinations for hepatitis B are made available to the employee by the city but are not required.
We had an entire room full of healthcare professionals.
They
including
left
those
too
working for
soon.
the county, and they all fled.
They would have asked
just
you to
when
have
we needed them.
more vaccinations. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? The resolution adopting job descriptions for certified fitness instructor, older adults, and noontime basketball clerk appears on page 40. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Aye.
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 Resolution passes. Next up, we have a Hallett's Pond Project DNR grant.
Mayor and members, Pete is here.
Pete is here.
Please, Pete, if you would.
That's what I was looking at. He looks so relaxed.
Not wearing a shirt. This is tobacco.
Mr. Moulton.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, we're here again in 2018 asking you to support a grant application to the DNR, the Outdoor Recreation Grant Program. We'd like to make reapplication again for funding for a pier, for Hallett's Pond, and for support for the asphalt trail. As you guys can see from the map above there, we've got a little drawing of how we would propose to complete what we've got on there. This year is going to include some maintenance on the facility. We plan to get the gravel trail completed, some trees removed in those areas there, and get everything set in place. So if this is successful, we will move forward. We do have money budgeted in the parks budget to make this happen. So regardless of whether we're successful or not, we will still be having some funds to do some work down there this year, which we'd probably come back to you in June once we find out where we're at and move forward in some form or fashion. But at this time, we'd like to have permission to submit the grant by the end of March and go from there.
I think a key point that Pete made early on is that you applied for this grant previously and provided approval. This is really a reapplication, but every time you apply, you have to have a council resolution providing support.
Right.
Question?
Is this a grant application process in which you can receive feedback from previous year's applications?
It is, and we also submitted a preliminary draft to get feedback.
A pre-proposal?
Right.
Great.
So we've had a couple rounds there, and we keep trying to make improvements.
Great.
Pete, if I remember right, wasn't there another group that was also applying for funds, and what is the status of that?
Yeah, Hallett's Association is working on a different project. They are also looking to do a variety of things at the facility there. They have been in touch with the Parks Board to explain some of the processes they'd like to see. They're not necessarily supportive of where we are locating the pier in our area. So we'll have some additional discussion if they are successful in any grant applications on improvements there.
Okay. Steve?
Pete, I just wanted to say I really support what you're doing here, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. I really like Hallett's Pond, and I think what you're doing is just a wonderful thing. And I know other people in town that are on wheels are also looking forward to a dock. So I can just say how much I appreciate your efforts. Yeah. Thank you.
Steve, if I can ask you a question, you know, there's been people that have approached me about the paving part of it. Are you finding, if you're going around there, is the gravel pathway adequate for you to get around, or is that a hindrance?
Well, the first time that I went on the gravel pathway, I did get stuck. And I was fortunate that Todd Prathke answered the phone call and the police department came, and they didn't need a wrecker, but they did pull me out because I was stuck.
When was this, Steve?
This was about a year, maybe 2 years ago. Okay. And then since then, the rock base was put on, and I thought, well, this is what's going to be made, and went on there, and I think I almost had to get my chair repaired because it was a real heck of a drive. But then the gravel spot there where the dock's going to be, didn't have the rock on, and that was fine. But trying to get around the Alice Pond in a chair in some spots was near to impossible.
Okay.
So, okay.
Thank you.
And the rock base trail, which was our first step, really, by adding asphalt to that rock base does not increase the pervious surface. Right. So we're already into the pervious surface with the Class 5 trail.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? The resolution authorizing submission of grant application to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Outdoor Recreation Grant Program appears on pages 43 and 44. Is there a motion for approval?
So approved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Member Carlin.
Aye.
Member Brown.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Member Graham.
Aye.
Member Kern.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports, and the first thing we have is a proclamation, which I will read, and it is for Vietnam Veterans Day, and it says, whereas the United States of America began military operations in the country of Vietnam on January 12, 1962, and whereas American involvement in the Vietnam War continued until the last American troops were evacuated from Vietnam on March 29, 1973. And whereas more than 58,000 American military men and women gave their lives in service to our nation during the Vietnam War, and whereas veterans of the Vietnam War deserve to be shown the respect and dignity of a grateful nation, and whereas Minnesota honors the sacrifice of these veterans and respects their dedication to the highest traditions of our armed forces, and whereas our nation stands stronger for the service of these veterans, and Minnesota stands ready to honor their proud legacy with our deepest gratitude. Now, therefore, I, Charles Zeman, Mayor of St. Peter, do hereby proclaim March 29, 2018 as Vietnam Veterans Day in the city, and hereby do encourage St. Peter residents to honor the sacrifices made by all veterans of the Vietnam War by attending the Vietnam Veterans Day ceremonies in witness thereof. Something to go along with this, their ceremony happens to be the same day as the tornado commemoration event. This year they are moving their ceremony down to the St. Peter American Legion, and it starts at 6:30. So maybe a timing thing for some, but it's all, they used to have it in anyway, they're having it at the Legion this year.
So in 5 years, it'll be 25 years for the tornado and 50 years for...
Yes. It is 45 years since we started occupation, stopped occupation.
Oh, you youngsters over there have no idea what we're talking about.
We're not that
I
young.
do. Yeah, you are.
Tornadoes of wind.
My father joined the military in 1971, and so I am quite aware.
The other thing I just mentioned about their ceremony that they have, I would like to thank Councilor Kwame for 2 weeks ago for conducting the meeting, and also Councilor Kwame and myself on Thursday night we attended a roundtable discussion with the League of Women Voters. Talked for about an hour and 20 minutes on various issues and items they had of concern and questions on.
The mayor talked for an hour, and I then cleared things up for 20 minutes at the end.
After I confused them all and myself, then we moved to other things. So I appreciate that. And that is all I have.
Members, just a few items. I want to mention the tornado commemoration event, which will be on March 29th, starting at 5:15. And so that's out at the new St. Peter High School within the theater area. You'll be getting some additional information as that event gets a little bit closer. And we want to encourage folks to watch in the hot sheet and on our Facebook page, and as we tweet and do other things to make sure that people know the nature of the event. A portion of that event will be to remember the events that occurred during the tornado. The majority of the event will be doing, I think, two primary things, one of which is to thank all the volunteers that came to help our community. So many people and organizations came to help us, so that's an important part of it. And then to really recognize the hard work of the community members themselves in rebuilding their homes and their businesses and our community overall and what's going on there. And there's certainly a short time period to recognize those that passed away at the time of the tornado. So that's really the goals of that event, and I think it'll be really good with music and images and video and all kinds of things, so I think it'll be very good. I do want to mention the workshop from just last week where we couldn't make a quorum, so I wanted to mention that in case folks were wondering why we haven't talked about that. And then I also want to give an update on the finance director's recruitment. There is some information here for you mentioning the events on Thursday. I'd love to have you here at about 1:15 if you could. The first interview, yeah, in this room. The first interview starts at 1:30, but I'd love to have you here a few minutes early so we can get organized and be ready to go as those people come forward. And so watch for that information. The names of the folks that you're going to be interviewing are listed on the screen. And for those of you in the media, if you want a written piece of paper, I have that as well for you after the meeting is over. The last one that I have is not on the list, but we had a couple of folks, 3 of you in this room that went to the APPA rally. And so typically we have a short report from those that attended. And so I'm sorry for not remembering to put it on here, but an important event for many of you. So if someone wants to comment, that's great.
I'll start out, it won't be long. Food was great. Susie?
You know, I've had the chance to go to this conference on several occasions now, and I've always said that the most beneficial part for me and for other council members is probably not participation in the APPA conference itself. I think that Pete gets a lot more out of that technical component of the conference, but for us, it is the opportunity to network with the elected officials of other communities who have public utilities, as we do, and also the opportunity to get to meet with our elected officials. So we had the chance to sit in the room with both Senators Klobuchar and Smith, and we met with Tim Walz's staff, and we also supported our other regional city partners by sitting in on some of their meetings with their representatives as well. The chance for us to be face-to-face with those elected officials is very, very important. And our very first day, we had a sort of a legislative recap by an individual who is hired on behalf of MMUA, Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. And he said it very well. It's important for us to be out there. If we're not out there, someone else will be out there, and their goals may not align with ours. And so it's really important that we go and share what the needs are and what the issues are in St. Peter, in southern Minnesota, and in municipal government as a whole.
Beside the food being great, we were the host, well, I hosted and for Representative Walz, but he was not able to attend. And there were 3 presentations done for his staff, short presentations, and Ms. Carlin was first up and did a marvelous job presenting our feelings and views on some items, and we really like to thank Pete, I would anyway, for leading me around and showing me what not to do and what to do, and it was very helpful. Pete, I don't know if you have anything more to say?
It's covered.
Mayor members, I don't have anything else for you this evening.
All right. Anybody else have anything? Steve?
Mr. Pratsky, relative to these interviews on Thursday, is it that you have to attend all or none?
It is not my place to tell council members what they cannot do or can do in attendance at meetings. However, I would suggest that if you're unable to attend them all, the value of just attending 1 or 2 is limited, because really what you're trying to do is compare these folks that are interviewing. And so without the ability to compare them all, the value is reduced.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, the process is really clear within your rules, ordinances, and job descriptions that it's my job to bring forward a recommendation. Our goal within these interviews is to give these folks an opportunity to see you, and to put them into a situation very much like they would see on a regular basis with you. As I mentioned to someone else, there's no use in giving someone a car driving test on a bicycle. You need to have them in a car, and this represents that car to some extent. And so it gives certainly an opportunity for you to get to meet them a little bit.
Are you planning on having other individuals from the city other than council members and yourself?
Department heads have been invited to this. Department heads have another opportunity to visit with these folks during the day, and so I've left it to department heads on their own as to whether they have time within their schedule or not. Part of my role is to set up an opportunity for you and for others within your organization, and then solicit some input and feedback before a recommendation is made.
Okay, thank you.
Steve Todd won't tell you, but I will. Don't, if you can't get to them all.
That's how I operate. I like it.
Right.
Yes or no.
I'll be more to the point. I'll be less
talking in
diplomatic,
circles.
Steve, for you next time.
Let me know, yes or no. That's all I need to know.
All right. Any other comments, or anybody have anything else to add? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second it.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
Jimmy's gone. Nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
Can't get out of here.
Can't open them, can't close them.